Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. A Delicate Arrangement, Chapter 10. Okay, for those of you who have not yet seen the first few videos for A Delicate Arrangement, I suggest you go view those now, as this is a continuation of that story. Rila doesn't often take insults from people like Glenn to heart, but it's not surprising that she does so today. Usually, on this side of the border, it's Rila who keeps her cool. Rila who calms him down and convinces him to let it go, even when she's the one who's been wronged. Today, she storms through the castle, throwing doors open in her wake, scowling at every guard who so much as looks at her wrong, while Callum trails after her, muttering apologies to innocent passerbys. In all fairness, he's pretty peeved off too. He's always known Blaine was a tad old-fashioned, to put it politely. But what happened in the dining hall was a step too far. Rila doesn't need him to defend her, but he's interfered anyways because he's seen her hand opening and closing by her side, like she's ready to start throwing punches. As satisfying as it would have been to see it, the situation between elves and humans is precarious enough without that sort of stress. He waits until they're all in the privacy of the stables before he reaches for her at last. "Hey," he says quietly, tugging her back and putting both of his hands on her shoulders. He studies her face and her posture, feels the tension in her shoulders, and hears the way her breath shakes as she lets it out. Callum doesn't think he's ever seen her so angry, and he can't even ask her to calm down, or let it go, or convince her that everything's okay, because she has every right and more to be pissed off. "Tell me what to do," he manages at last, because there's nothing else he can say, and this is all he can offer. "Tell me what to do to make you feel better, and I'll do it." She shrugs his hands off. "It's fine," she says shortly. Don't worry about it, it's fine." It's not. He hurries around her to block her off before she can stalk away, a grim determination rising in his chest. "He can't treat you like that. No one should be able to treat you like that. And, Rila, I get it, okay? We've worked too hard. worked too long and too hard to get up in arms about it now. But there has to be something. There's not, she snaps. What are we even doing this for, Callum? What's the point? People like Blaine are always going to exist, and nothing we do is ever going to change their minds. Not even if we go through with Ezran's stupid plan. I'm tired of this. Hey, look at me. He rubs her shoulders again with both hands and slides them up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing the edges of the warrior's marks on her cheeks. It's worth it, Rayla. I promise you it is. I've seen it. I haven't. She won't look at him. All I've seen is fighting and prejudice over the stupidest things. And Callum, we've been doing this for 3 years and nothing's changed. People and elves still hate each other. Why even bother? Callum ducks his head and tilts her face towards him, trying to catch her eye. She lets him, reluctantly, the hardness in her stare dissipating as she meets his gaze. You should have been with me yesterday, he says quietly. Things are changing for the better, and people like Blaine can't stop it. Giving up now will. It's not until she touches his hands that he realizes how close he's brought them. Something builds inside him, an urge to bring them closer still, to press his lips against her forehead and hold her to him until her anger leaves her completely. It makes his heart hammer in his chest, and his breath hitches in his throat. But she tugs his hands away from her face, and he doesn't get the chance. Rayla? Just let it go, she murmurs, pushing past him, and takes the saddle off the rack between the stables. I can't be here today. She calls the filly Vorby. Callum can hear her muttering to her as she saddles her. He's never been particularly good at horse riding himself, and in the past they've been happy to share. But there's a sense of privacy in Vorby's stall. Like Rayla can confide in her more comfortably than she can confide in him as she mounts up. Reluctant to interrupt, Callum leaves her to it, wandering a couple of stalls down to a gentle-looking mare. They saddle up in relative silence. Every now and then, Callum glances at her out of the corner of his eye, watching the way she goes about making ready and the swift precision of her actions. She and Vorby seem fond of each other. There's a familiarity between them that he doesn't have with any of the horses in this stable. And Callum wonders to himself if she was the filly Ezran wanted to introduce Rayla to. Rayla finishes up faster than he does. She mounts up and urges Vorby outside without waiting for him. Callum scrambles to catch up with her. His own mare is sweet-tempered, used to being ridden and forgiving when he pulls too tightly on her reins on his way up. When they trot outside, Rayla's agitation is mirrored in the way Vorby stamps with her front hoofs. Lead the way then, she says shortly, tugging gently on Vorby's reins. There's an odd sort of apprehension in her shoulders, Callum notes, as he eases the mare past. But he doesn't ask. He pulls forward, reins wrapped tightly in his hands, a little afraid of falling off. They head off, Callum with caution, Rayla with grace, her hair fluttering behind her in the breeze as they ride into town. The crowds in the city part as they pass. Every now and then someone frowns at them. More correctly, at Rayla. And Callum catches the way she draws her hood over her head as they ride. He wishes they were walking. At least then he'd be steady enough to ward off the looks. It's not too long a ride. Faster than walking, certainly, but it feels longer than it is because of the way Callum clings to his mare. Relief floods his system when the storefront of the Wishbone comes into view. He slides off the mare, foot almost catching the saddle as he dismounts. "Come on," he says to Rayla, tugging the mare the rest of the way. Rayla follows him, her hood still up, her eyes downcast like she's dreading what might be inside. They leave the horses out front, and Callum ushers her inside first, his hand at the small of her back. Claudia is behind the counter today. She greets them with a grin. "Back so soon?" she asked, stepping around the counter. Callum grins back, his shoulders relaxed a little now that they are out of the open. He accepts the hug that Claudia offers him and tugs Rayla forward, the glare gone from her face at last as her hood falls and she examines the inside of the shop. Claudia's grin widens, but she steps back and offers Rayla a polite curtsy. "Lady Rayla," she greets. Rayla blinks, catches sight of Claudia, and a flicker of confusion and uncertainty crossing her face before it turns into a look of disgust. "Never call me that again," she says dryly, but her lips twitch upward a little as she takes her in. Callum grins at them, pleased. He doesn't think they've ever had the opportunity to be properly introduced, and while Claudia and Soren had spent an amount of time chasing them down before they returned Zim, neither of them were bad people, and it's nice to see them in the same room as Rayla without them trying to kill each other. How are you?" Rayla asks her after a minute. Claudia has none of it. "Oh, come here," she laughs, pulling her into a hug. "It's good to see you." "Is it?" asks Rayla, still a little uneasy. "The last time you saw me, we were on opposite sides." "And we're not now," says Claudia. "Look how well you've been looking after Callum. How can I resent you knowing that?" She grins and pulls back. "Come with me. I know a certain little girl who's going to lose her mind that you're here." Lessa lost her mind all right. Her eyes go wide as Claudia leads them both onto the landing of Alice and Elena's apartment, and she abandons the tea party she's having with her mother entirely to stare in awe at Rayla. "Lady Rayla?" she murmurs, curtsying gracelessly. Whatever irritation Rayla might have had left over from breakfast leaves her in a rush. Her lips pull into a delighted smile as she crouches in front of Lessa. "You don't have to call me that, little one," she says. "Just Rayla's fine. You must be the little lady Lessa. Prince Callum's told me all about you." Lessa nods eagerly, golden eyes filled with admiration. Inwardly, Callum thinks that it's a little unfair how much Lessa likes her. Yesterday, she'd been determined to hide behind Soren until she decided he was worth liking. There was none of that today. She has eyes for no one else as she toddles forward to grasp Rayla's fingers in hers. "Will you have tea with me and Mommy?" "Of course," says Rayla, allowing herself to be pulled forward. "It'd be rude to refuse an invitation from such a distinguished lady." "I guess I can say goodbye to being her favorite aunt," mutters Claudia under her breath. Callum snorts. "I don't think anyone really had a chance against Rayla." He chuckles, watching them fondly. "Probably." Claudia rolls her eyes and heads for the kitchen. "Can I get you some tea?" Callum tears his eyes from them. "Tea would be great." "You seem quiet," Claudia says, setting his tea in front of him. He's sitting at Atlas and Ellen's dining table. In truth, he's been watching Rayla. She's at the little table in their living room with Lessa chatting happily away in her lap. It's the first time he's looked at her since breakfast that she hasn't had a scowl fixed on her lips, and the first time she's looked properly at ease since Ezran had given them his proposition. She's pretty when she smiles, something he thinks he's always known, but something he only admits to himself now because she's been so stressed the past couple of days. Quiet how? Claudia shrugs, settling in the seat opposite him. Tough morning? Callum snorts a little bit. He mutters into his teacup. I won't ask then. Claudia chuckles. She drops a sugar cube into her tea and rests her chin in her palm. I remember when you used to look at me like that. Callum almost chokes on his tea. Sorry. She smiles at him, wistful and knowing, rueful and happy, all at once. Back before the war ended, when no one knew when it might end, my dad told me to come to terms with the idea that I might end up having to marry you one day. It made sense, right? I was a nobleman's daughter. You were the step-prince with an obvious crush. She smirked at him. I was just a kid, mutters Callum, hiding the flush on his cheeks with his teacup. Claudia chuckles. It's only been 3 years, Callum. She sighs and slurps at her tea. I didn't hate the idea, you know. You were a sweet kid, and we were friends. And me being a nobleman's daughter, any marriage I would have had would have been political, and marrying you would have been the best case scenario. Thanks, I think. She laughs. I don't want to tell you what you're feeling, she says carefully, but you need to think about this. Really think about this. And whether or not you, both of you, think it's as bad as you think it is, or as good as Ezra says it might be. And before you say anything, I know you haven't had the chance to really think about it or talk about it. But here's the thing. Ezran's your brother. He would never ask you to do anything that would make you unhappy. She pauses and nods at Rayla. Would a life with Rayla make you unhappy? The question is heavy, and it settles in Callum's stomach like lead. He knows what the answer is, he thinks. But he's hesitant to admit it because he knows what Claudia's next question will be. Why? He doesn't think he's ever been introspective enough to answer that. Claudia chuckles at him. It's just something to think about, she says when he says nothing. She sips delicately at her tea and gets up to join Lessa's tea party, leaving Callum speechless and alone at the dining table.